All right. Great. We're recording. We want to make sure that we have this ready to go. So first, as you see here, we have Denise Jacobs. If any of you were at the last couch combo, you would have seen that Denise had joined us again there and started a really great conversation for us about getting paid to speak. And so we're really excited to have her back. She's a speaker, an author, and a creativity evangelist who has spoken at conferences and companies all around the world. She's the CEO of The Creative Dose and has written a book, as she shared, called Banish Your Inner Critic, which is really a handbook on silencing your fears to unleash your creativity. And she's also the head investigator of the Creativity Revolution, which is a movement to help spread the force of creativity around the world. And also founded Rock the Web, a movement focused on changing the face of the tech industry by increasing visibility of speakers on stage, which we, really relate to and love at Women Talk Design. So
Yay.
I'm very, very excited to have her here. And then next, joining us right here, we have Christina Wodtke. Christina is the founder of Women Talk Design. So we would definitely not be here without her. And she, gosh, such a resume ahead of her. She started her career, working and really helping write the book on information architecture. She worked at places like LinkedIn, MySpace, Zynga, Yahoo. She's started companies, she's written books, and she's currently a lecturer at Stanford. And so really excited to have both of them here sharing their perspectives on getting paid to speak. Christina, we can't see you, but it sounds like we can hear you. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm not completely, I went for my phone.
Okay.
So you can hear me via cell. Is that working for you?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wow.
And yeah, if you want to, try as Denise is talking at some point or whatnot, join in. We'd love to see your face as well. But in the meantime, audio is great.
Yeah. I'm going to do what I can to make this work.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, let's get started. We'll have Denise get started with this first question.
Okay.
We'd really love to hear about the first time that you asked for money. So let's hear about the first time that you, realized that you wanted to get paid, and how did you realize to get there? Tell us a bit about that story.
So it's actually kind of a fun story, and fun in a sense. So I had been speaking. I started speaking very seriously in 2010. And Christina, can you mute one of your sources so we're not getting feedback? Thank you, kind miss. You're so good to us. And you can see her ceiling. Look at her ceiling. But so I started speaking in 2010 because I really wanted to be a speaker and I was very gung-ho about it, but I didn't realize kind of at the time that you could get paid to speak necessarily. So I spoke for 2 years and I spoke a lot. I did a lot of international speaking. My first kind of major speaking engagement was actually at the Future of Web Design in London in 2010. And then that just put me on the radar of a lot of people in Europe and in other places. And so I did a lot of speaking, but I wasn't asking for any money. I did get offered to get paid to speak and kind of went into a tizzy about how much to ask. And then for some reason or another, that just seemed like a blip because that organizer had said, hey, I'll pay you. How much do you want to get paid? But it didn't register with me that was something that I should be doing regularly. So that was like in 2011. And in so from 2010, actually 3 years, 2010, 2011, 2012, I did not get paid to speak except for once. At the end of 2012, I was talking to a friend of mine, Whitney Hess, who is used to be a UX designer and now does a lot of like mindfulness coaching and stuff like that with leaders. She was like, wait a minute, you're not getting paid? And I was like, no. And she was like, girl, you need to be getting paid. She was like, you're in demand. People are asking for you. Like, you need to get paid. And I was like, oh, how do I do that? And she was like, so we had arranged that she would like kind of be like an in-between for me. And I would send people to her. I came up with a number. And then people started asking me, when people were asking me to speak, I would say, would love to, this is how much it costs. And the first couple of times, people were like, we can't pay that. And I was like, okay, we'll have a nice conference. Then I got invited to keynote a conference. And this is also a distinction that we can make later on, that there's a difference between being a keynote speaker and what's known as a breakout speaker. Unless the conference is a single track, and then it's kind of different. But when you're a keynote speaker, yeah, let me put a pin in that and come back to it, because I want to make sure I get this story and I'm succinct about it. So I got invited to keynote a conference. I was going to be the closing keynote. And so I was having a conversation with the organizers, and I'm like super excited. And I had my number in my head. And so we're talking and this and stuff. And they said, well, we can give you, a conference pass, and, we'll do hotel, and we'll fly you, and this and this and this. And then, we'd like to know what sometimes they refer to it as an honorarium, what your honorarium fee is. And so I'm thinking I'm all cool and stuff. And I'm just like, well, usually meaning I've never done this before. Usually in situations like this, when I, come and do keynote and close out, and I'm going to create a new keynote for you, blah, blah, blah. In a situation like this, my fee is $3,000. And the woman, this is what the beat did. I said $3,000, and it was like, beat. Okay, well then we'll send you the thing, and we'll do the contract. And as soon as I could hear the enthusiasm in their voices, I knew that it was too low. That they were expecting 10, 15, 20, that's something. They weren't expecting the number that I gave them. So I was distraught about this. I was like, I can't believe I just undercut myself. So I talked to a friend who does keynote speaking, and she was like, you need to be charging $10,000. And I was like, what? And so during the course of this hour-long conversation that I had with her, she coached me to get comfortable saying I cost $10,000. Then fast forward 2 months, I do another keynote. Somebody there who works at Automatic, the company who makes WordPress, says, you should come and do our company meeting. And I was like, okay. He puts me in touch with the organizer. We're talking, blah, blah, blah. She was like, okay, well, like, how much do you cost? And I was like, okay, I've trained, I've done the stuff. I've been doing like mental push-ups. I'm ready. I said, $10,000. She goes, okay. So anyways, I'll send you the contract, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, whoa, wait, that was too easy. So it's a moving target is what I'm saying. That was the first time. It's a moving target. You have to come up with your number and know that some people it's going to be too high for, and some people it's going to be too low for. And you have to like figure out your number, and then you have to kind of stick with it. And then what we'll talk about later is kind of different things that you can have as compensation to make up the value if they can't make up the value. That's my story. Christina, did you have anything to share? I mean, I know you do, but. We don't know which source you're coming from, Christina. Oh no, I can't hear people now.
Christina, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Oh. Hi, I'm there. How is this working? I switched to the phone, but it's on cell data. We'll see if this works. Do I sound complete?
We can hear you, yeah. If you wanna share. We'd love to hear your first story.
Well, for me, I would like to reframe it a little bit as a sort of a journey that I've been taking since forever. So I remember when I first was working in consulting, wow, I look so different.
I like your shirt.
Thank you. I'm very proud of it. There's usually no point in wearing a nice shirt. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off audio because it's just driving me up a tree. Video, I mean, audio is important. Okay, feel much better. So real quick, I basically, the first time anybody asked me how much I cost, I didn't learn until much later that that was not a question you should ever answer. It was around salary. And luckily through salary negotiations, I learned when somebody'd say, well, what was your last salary? I'd say, you know, I'm not sure that's exactly relevant. What I'm thinking about here is the entire package. So I'd love to know what you're thinking about as an offer, and I can let you know if that's what I'm looking for or not. And I used to play this game with HR to see who would give up first. You know, we were playing a little chicken. And that actually shocked the shit out of me because I was apparently making half as much as I should. At one point when I was at MySpace and I'd been promoted twice, the new head of HR came and said, Christina, I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but I don't think it's morally correct to let you keep going. You should not be making 175,000. You should be making 250,000 because everybody else is making that. And I was so mad. I love the HR person, but I was just steaming. And it gave me quite an attitude about getting paid. So I think the first time I got paid, it was just for like an academic conference. They were paying me a little money and they said, you can spend it on your travel. If you make cheap travel, you'll make a little. If you want business travel, whatever. And they let me do that. And I got 5K. And after a while, I was just getting angrier and angrier because, of course, I was still carrying around this fury about my paycheck. And I learned when I was consulting that every time somebody says yes quickly, like you, Denise, you have to raise your price the next time somebody calls you. And I kept raising it and raising it and raising it until people were like, I don't know, I have to go back and ask. And I thought, that's the sweet spot, right?
That's it.
That's the sweet spot. It's like, oh, that's a little more than we were thinking. But I got to say that just as what you said, there's a bunch of things that change your price. UX conferences pay like shit, to be quite honest. I was speaking at them for a long time. And I think it's because design in general really controls their budget. And that's always a problem. So it's very hard for them to have to get money because they have to ask every single time. But business people and HR usually control their own budget. So a keynote for most UX conferences tends to be about 5K in my experience. If you're not a keynote, you often don't get paid, or if you have enough standing in the community, maybe you can get 1 or 2K or travel pulled out of it. But when I started talking at business conferences and product conferences, it improved. Product conferences is a little more, like maybe 10K. But corporate is the money, baby, the money. It's so beautiful. Yeah.
It's
so right now, a couple things have raised my price. And that's the other thing is a book will increase how much money you can ask for. And it actually improved my salary, which I was surprised by. And the other thing that improved my price was teaching at Stanford. It's a big name. So I went from 10K a day to 25K a day if I do like a workshop or workshop and talk. My talks tend to be a little less, but not a lot less, especially if there's travel. That's the other thing everybody forgets is like taking 2 days to get to Tel Aviv is not the same as driving to San Jose. So in my speaker sheet, I always differentiate on travel. With webinars, I haven't quite sorted that out yet, but I suspect it's going to be my local rate and it's still my time, right?
Awesome. Thank you, both of you. That was
nodding a lot. I was wondering if you had something that I said that sparked an idea in your head.
Who, me or Danielle?
Oh, Denise.
Oh, me. So what you just said. So the travel and the
corporate gig.
The corporate gig. Yes. So the difference between an industry event and a corporate event. Or a community, there's kind of like, so I do want to make this distinction that there is a difference between what I refer to as kind of community events or like community organizations that do industry events that are done by sometimes community organizations or sometimes they're done by companies. And then corporate events that are internal corporate events or that are huge events done by kind of that are part of a corporation, but corporate events. So actually I would say like public corporate events and then private corporate events. Okay, so community run events, industry events, public corporate events, and private corporate events. So like here's an example. So if you're in tech, for example, a conference like WordCamp, if you do use WordPress and you're going to go to a WordCamp, like a WordCamp is usually done by a local WordCamp group. They're doing the conference for, the community in that area. The ticket price is not going to be particularly high because they're trying to make it accessible to more people. and something like that. A conference like that, depending on how many sponsors or, you know, how much sponsor money they get, most likely they would not be paying any of the speakers. It's like a good opportunity for exposure, whatever, a good opportunity for you to practice your craft. An industry event that is done by like either like a company or something like that, a lot of times, again, it's really about the sponsorships. Most conferences, and Danielle and Christina, you can totally weigh in on this, but my experience is that, or my understanding is that most conferences make their money or are able to run and do things because of the sponsorships that they get from companies that help them stay afloat, unless they're very high-end conferences where they are charging a lot of money for the ticket. And even if they are a high-end conference where they're charging $1,000 or more for a ticket, then typically then it's a higher, the whole production itself is higher end. It's in a higher end venue. They've got more food, they've got more this, they got more that. It's more glitz and glamour. And so it's a more expensive conference for them to put on. Corporate conferences, so like, for example, Cisco Live. So Cisco puts on this huge event every year. It's 30,000 people. There's tons and tons of money that they put into it, but it's also done by a company. And so a huge company. And so they pay a lot of money for a lot of the people that they have come in. And then, for example, then Facebook could be doing a conference that's an internal conference, and they've like figured out, you know, they're going to do it on the campus. They've got budget for it and all that stuff. Something like that, they will have a lot of budget. They will have a lot of money. So in terms of like where the money is, I feel like that's kind of a spectrum where if you're going to a community event, run event, there's a really good chance that they're not going to have budget for speakers, and they probably didn't even maybe never necessarily considered that. An industry conference, they may have budget for speakers, but it's not a very big budget. Like Christina was saying, UX conferences, design conferences, other professional developer conferences, you know, et cetera. Then corporate conferences, I'm sure there's probably something like in between there. But, you know, then company conferences, corporate conferences that are like industry conferences, and then internal conferences. The internal conferences, God bless it. Oh, right. One other thing, professional associations. So that's actually, I think, what goes between the industry conference and the corporate industry conferences. Professional associations also typically have budgets. Sometimes they have, depending on the association, sometimes they have a lot, and sometimes they don't, but they typically will budget for speakers. So, woo!
Great. Thank you, Denise. That was really helpful to get the lay of the
I need
land.
a cigarette after that now.
Yeah. And I see, Ari, I see your question in there. We're definitely going to get to that. I'll ask that in just a second. But, you know, one of the things I'd love to follow up with is you were talking about, you know, how much these different conferences pay. How do you know, right? And like, how do you start that conversation? I think talking to a lot of speakers, that's something they struggle with, is like someone asks them to speak, and if the event organizer doesn't bring up compensation, how do you bring it up?
I have many thoughts. But I just talked, so I'm going to let Christina field that one, unless you want to kick it back to me.
Oh, wow. Luckily, Danielle unmuted me. Using the phone is very problematic. If I could turn on my camera, I would do it now, because I think I've got it sorted. I love it when you talk, because you give me time to get my feet underneath me. You know, what's really awesome is that, actually, I want to start with one more thing, because you talked about academic. You didn't talk about academic conferences.
I did, and I haven't actually spoken at many. I haven't spoken at any academic conferences, so I kind of forget about them completely.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of pressure on me these days to actually go to them, which is kind of tough. But because I have like never gone to like Chi or Grace Hopper, despite Grace Hopper's very important to women, of course, just because they charge their speakers. And I just cannot. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just cannot believe that, and it's actually quite upsetting. So my feeling is that if you're not paying me for my knowledge and expertise, I literally cannot afford to do it. I mean, I don't know about you ladies. I'm guessing you're probably home. You're trying to do the child care thing. It's driving you crazy. You've got tons of work. And on top of it, somebody's asking you to show up, take the time out, and share your expertise on top of that. I get that academic conferences are aimed at professors who get their schools to pay for it, but it's still wrong. And I think the part of it that upsets me the very most is that women are denied opportunities to have this networking, have this connection, because all the literature says women are responsible for the bulk of the child care, the bulk of the elder care. I've organized conferences and women will pull out because they're like, I'm really sorry, work's really busy. My grandmother's gone to a hospital with a stroke and I'm not gonna be able to do it. And I'll say, can you suggest somebody else? And they will suggest a white man who will immediately say yes. And I think that it's just built into our culture that the guys support us. And so I feel like for women, we should be bending over backwards to make the stage more fair. We should be paying them. We should be thinking about childcare, which conference organizers always freak out about. GDC finally added childcare after years of not doing it, and they're a multi-million-dollar operation. It's just, there's such a blinder on guys to what it takes for us to be able to bring our knowledge there. And so the guys get famous and we don't, and that's really upsetting. So I just ranted like crazy. Maybe I ranted enough, Denise, that you can take the next question while I see if I can turn on video.
Yes, but with Daniel, what was the question
about,
that you?
Yeah, about starting the conversation with event organizers.
Yes. So let me get back to that one. So and Christina, those are all like really, really relevant and salient points, and it is disturbing, and that's part of the reason that you started, and like you and Danielle are doing this Women Talk Design thing, is to actually, and that's one of the reasons why I started Rock the Web, is because I personally, and all of us, really want to see the face of expertise change to reflect who actually has the expertise, right? It's not just white men who have expertise. All of us have expertise. We all have different stories to tell, different experiences to share, and it's all relevant, and more people need to, and especially, so actually, before I answer the question, Danielle, about how to start the conversation, I do want to give this little tidbit of why it's so important for there to be more kind of a diverse representation on stage. And that is that when I decided to become a speaker, when I went to my very first web design conference called Web Visions in Portland in 2005. And I went because I used to teach web design and web development, and I had the books that I used were by this woman named Molly Holtschlag, and I was a total fangirl, right? Christina, you know who she is. I was a total fangirl, and she was speaking at this conference, and I was like, this is a great opportunity. The conference is only $75 for admission. I'm gonna go, I'm gonna roll down there, I'm gonna go. I'd never been to a conference before, and I went and I saw her speak. And when I saw her on stage, it was like I had this epiphany, because she was on stage. She was making the same kind of jokes that I make. She was teaching the same content that I teach, but instead of like me being in front of a class of 24 people and having to grade papers and having to do grades and stuff over the course of 12 weeks, she got up, she spoke for an hour, 200, 500 people, however many people in the room. And then she was like, peace, I'm out. And then everybody was like, Molly, Molly, Molly. And it was amazing. And I thought, that is exactly what I want to do. That is what I want to do. And if it had been a guy, if it had been a white guy, Matt Mullenweg, who started Automatic, was at that conference. BJ Fogg, who teaches at Stanford, was at that conference. I didn't look at them speaking. The guy who started Flickr, Stuart Butterfield, was at that conference speaking. I didn't look at them and think, I want to do that, and that's possible. But when I saw Molly doing it, I thought, this is possible for me. So my very emotional plea for you to understand that you are needed on stage. Your expertise, your knowledge, your stories, everything about you. And I don't care if you think you're an expert. I don't care if you think you've done enough. Anything that you've done now, you're going to be at least one step ahead of somebody else, and you're going to be able to help them. into my rant. Now, to answer
Damn, girl, can we just stop for a second? We need to clip that video and put it up because everybody needs to hear that. That was so beautiful.
Thank you, Denise.
This is why I do what I do.
Mm-hmm. You and me both, sister. You and me both.
Right? Precious. So the question is, how do you start the conversation? So like I said, at first I wasn't having that conversation at all. So part of my problem, and this is also one of the reasons why I was so excited about doing this couch conversation, was that when I started speaking, I was under the impression that once I got to be good enough, people would start to offer me money. Then when I had my conversation with Whitney Hess, and she was like, no, you get paid when you ask for money. You don't get paid when you don't ask for money. And I was like, oh. And so so take that. Let me just rewind that. You get paid when you ask for money, right? So the way to start having the conversation, and there's a lot of great, there's a lot of people who have some great tips and stuff like that. I actually recommend a book called Exactly What to Say by Phil Jones. And I have it here somewhere on my bookshelf, but I'm not going to go and get it. So it's called Exactly What to Say. And he has kind of what he calls magic words, ways to phrase things so that you actually end up getting the answers and the responses that you want. Now, I actually haven't used his book necessarily. I want to make a cheat sheet out of everything. His book is very short. It's very succinct. It's very concise. To actually make a cheat sheet and use the phrases and the conversations that I typically have with conference organizers and use some of those phrases to do that. And I know people who have done that with great success. When people say, I would like for you to come and speak at the conference, my structure of my conversation is usually as follows, like, so great, want to hear about it. Tell me about the size of the audience. That's important. Tell me about what you're trying to do. Does the conference have a theme? What do you want me to do? If people aren't clear about whether they want me to keynote or not, I typically will say, so did you want me to be the opening keynote or the closing keynote? To presume that I come in knowing what my value is. I know that I'm a better speaker as an opening or closing keynote, and depending on how I'm feeling that day, I'll try to talk them into either one, or push for one. I actually like being opening keynote a lot, so I typically will be like, when I'm opening keynote, I set the tone for the conference. I get everybody up and energized and pumped, and facilitate connections between the attendees, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh my God, I totally want that. I'm like, of course you do, right? And then we get to the certain point after we find out the time, the dates, and all of this stuff. If I have had any preparation, sometimes I go to the site, if they have it up, to see how much the ticket prices are, so that you can start to see, like, okay, how much money are they going to potentially be making from this with the number of attendees that they're going to have, right? You can take into consideration early bird tickets and all that stuff. And then they say, well, I usually will say, what's your budget for speakers? Or what's your budget for the keynote speakers? And if they're just like, well, I did this, I'll be like, totally understand. Like, sometimes they're just like, well, we were thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of blah, and like 5 and 10. And I'll be like, that's great. My fee is this amount. And if it's more than the amount they did, then like Christina said, they'll be like, oh, well, we weren't planning for that, but let me see. And I'm like, happy, why don't you go and check and see what you can do. Come back to me. We can talk some more. I totally want to work with you. Sometimes when they're a community event and I recognize they're a community event, I say, I totally understand that you're a community event and everything. Here's my community rate, right? So my community event rate is lower than my typical keynote rate so that I can work with these. And I say, here's my keynote rate. Here's my list of other things that I would like to have in concerns. Because you can't actually make the fee, here are some other ways that we talk about compensation. Like, if it's in a cool place, to ask for a companion ticket so that you can take a friend, or you can take your partner, or you can take your parents, or something like that. Not necessarily in the age of COVID, but you know, in the future when we get to go outside and play again. I'll ask for extra accommodation. I'll ask for one conference actually paid for in Greece. They actually paid for an extra week of hotel where I was going to go on vacation afterwards. Like you can ask for media interviews. You can ask for VIP dinners with their sponsors. Like there's a whole lot of things that you can do. You can ask for access to their mailing list. You can ask for things that will help you further along your business, because that's the other thing. Even if you're doing this as a side hustle, it is a business. And you do need to eat, and you do need to keep the lights on, right? And so that's kind of the way that I like to structure the conversation. The other thing that you can also do, and I saw that somebody's got a hard stop at 9. The other thing that you can do is also ask them, well, how much budget do you have for the whole conference? Why can't you ask that? You can always ask them, well, what are we talking about here? If you're going to have multiple keynote speakers, blah, 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 you know, like how much are you talking about? Well, if that's the case, then let's try to do this. One last thing, Danielle, I know I apologize for talking so long, but
it's all good stuff. It's all good stuff.
You were talking about how to even know. There was a good question that I wanted to circle back to. It was kind of like, how do you even know, right, what to ask? Like, how do you even know to ask for money, like at all? Here's another tip for you guys. When you go and they kind of ask you, they'll probably send you the link. Here's the link to the conference, blah, 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 blah. You can go and you can do some research, and you can research who's speaking at the conference now, and who has spoken at that conference in the past if they have had other iterations of the conference. If you see people that you recognize from your industry, and you know that those people would not actually get on stage without getting paid, then you have an idea that these people, and also if you have an idea of about how much they get paid to speak, then you know that this conference most likely has budget for speakers. And so that's one thing that is a very kind of like pro speaker tip type of thing, is to go in to do research and say, oh, if Tamsin Webster and Phil Jones, who are two friends of mine who are speakers, if they've spoken at this conference, then I know they have budget, and I know that their budget for speakers is probably this amount. Right?
Great. Do the research. I love it. I love it. And I love, Denise, that you have your process of, you know, talking and getting excited about, you know, having you on board and then talking about the amount. And I know Christina has a different approach. I'd love for you to share, Christina, how you broach the topic of speaker pay with event organizers.
Yeah. So since I'm going to teach, excuse me, I always wake up a little furry. Don't worry, I'm not dying. It's just allergy season. Even the cat has allergies. So, you know, one thing I want to say to add to what Denise just said, it's really short, is what number would make you not resent the organizer?
The resentment number.
The resentment number. I'm like, I try to picture the whole thing. I'm like, well, I'm going to drive to friggin' SFO. I'm going to pay for long-term parking. I'm going to be in that airport again. I'm going to have to fly. I'm going to have to give the talk. I'm going to have to go to dinners. And I'm an introvert, even though nobody ever believes that, you know. And I'm like, okay, I would not feel good unless they give me $10,000. And if they give me $5,000, I'm going to resent them. I'm going to hate their asses. So I just don't want to do that. So that's the first thing I'd want to share. I want to share a few core concepts because I am about to teach a class at 9 a.m. So I want to talk a little bit about, I have 6 things that help me decide whether or not I'm going to give a talk, speaking of your travel idea. One is right price. Are they paying the number I like to be paid? Next is right people to reach. Sometimes I want to reach a new audience, like a business audience or somebody. And as soon as you break into a new group, other people will hire you. So sometimes I'll do it for that reason. Right talk. I'm tired of talking about OKRs, but I love teaching drawing. So if somebody wants me to do a storytelling or a drawing class, I often will let my rates come down because it's a blast for me. Right location to speak to Greece. Like, oh, I would love to talk in Bangkok, you know. Right effort, how hard is it going to be? I'll say yes to free Q&As, but I won't say yes to something I have to prepare. And the last one, I've called it different things, but I think I'm finally calling it right values. It used to be right cause, like I would do something for Women Talk Design. Sometimes it's the right purpose because I think they're going to make a difference. But now it's just, does the conference organizer's values merge with mine? You know, and that's when you get the situation where Altria would like you to come and do a talk for them. And as you know, that's their fake name for Philip Morris. And I'm like, you know what? You cannot pay me enough. I was sitting there going, 20,000, 30,000, 50,000. There's no number for Altria. There's no number to do something I hate. And it made me rethink some other ones like Walmart that doesn't treat their people right. You know, and after a while, I have a list of people, left-wing think tank in Washington, D.C., right-wing, excuse me, it was right-wing. Trust me, left-wing, I'm all over it, free. I was like, nope. So I found those 6 points to help me decide. Really useful. I also want to show a few things, and then I will hand over, hopefully this will work because it's just video. I'm going to share this one. Okay, share. And hello. So I got this from Erica Meyer, but I changed it for my own self. So when somebody reaches out to speak, I suck at asking for a lunch, so I often send this. And some of the language is from him, and a bunch of it is how I've changed things for my own values. But asking how will you plan to compensate your speakers kinds of gets at whether or not they're paying people.
I love it.
I don't want to, even if I get paid, I don't want to be part of something that's screwing over other people. I did put in my occasional exceptions. I use the word occasional, so hopefully they don't take advantage of me. I want to know audience, because remember I have my 6 things. And I give them the talks that are trivial for me to do. I do charge extra if I have to do a new talk. If I have to do a new talk, I'm like, that is my time. And then after, if we are going to do it, then the second piece of information is from Karen, I can't think of her last name, but she's awesome. Yes, thank you. It just hits things that for her she needs, and you want to know what you're walking into. I'm lucky I can go anywhere in improv, but not everybody has an improv attitude. So that's proved to be useful. This is my beloved, oh shoot, let me share a different screen.
Will you share that? Would you be willing to share that with I would love to have that.
Oh, of course. Everybody can. I'm all about. We've stopped saying opening the kimono for what I think is the right reason. Instead, we say I'm happy to unzip the hoodie for you, Denise. No problem.
Unzip the hoodie.
Let's unzip that hoodie and show us what we got. Okay. Are you seeing a drive now? Yes.
Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. So I tend to keep my stuff in one drive. As you can see, I have a spreadsheet I need to track, because sometimes people don't pay you. Even good people will forget to pay you. So I like to track who's supposed to be paying me things. I have my letter to the organizer. I have, let's go up. The important thing is I have my bios here, and I have my decks, and I have my descriptions, and then I have untidy descriptions of new things. And that helps a lot, so that when I need my letter, I can find my letter. When I need my bios, I have literally different bios. I don't know why my screen share doesn't show everything, but I like to have a bunch of different bios, which makes a difference. So here's my bios, and I have a super short one. I have one for storytelling talks. I have a long one. I have a teaching one. I have a startup one, because I'm often reaching out to different audiences. So I want to make sure that I'm hitting that. And then last but never least, I want to share my speaker sheet up for you folks. And then I think I have to change my screen again, don't I? Do you see a speaker sheet, Danielle?
It says Christina is sharing her screen, but it doesn't show what's on the screen.
Okay, then let's do it one more time. I keep having to unshare and reshare.
Oh, I see a bio now. I see your bio.
I have good news. Woo! Check it out. Do you see it?
Let me see your bio.
You only see my bio, but I
Yes,
switched
ma'am.
to the right screen. Oh, rat's asses.
Rat's
Okay,
asses.
I'm going to give you one. I'm going to give it another good try because I do think this is the money shot,
This
so
is
to
a money
speak.
shot.
Literally,
This
it's
is
the money shot.
literally the money shot. Yeah. So I have a hard time writing about myself, and I found this amazing marketer who lives just outside of Atlanta, has a very simple life, charges not so much. I keep raising her rates before she raises mine because it drives me crazy. And she helped me write this language because it's hard to brag about yourself. If you can always brag about yourself if you're capable of it. If it's a hard time, you can get a friend. I have my talks and workshops. I have my creds. I did collect some nice quotes from people. These were from my LinkedIn references, which I used. A quote, I need to update these clients because I've got sexier ones, but I want to draw your attention to that lower right. So when somebody reaches out to me, I have an assistant, which sounds fancy, but actually I found her next door. She's an empty nester yoga teacher who decided that she was bored, so she helps me out here and there, and she sends this. And it has my rates, and then people disappear. And I want people to disappear. Because I teach full time. So I only want to do it if it's financially valuable because teaching doesn't pay well. And that's going to be my transition to hand off to Denise because I know Denise has a very, very different approach to how she handles these things.
Christina,
Right.
quickly,
Okay.
people weren't able to see that. So if you'd be open to letting me send it out to this group, we can follow up with it and send it out afterwards.
Of course, absolutely.
Awesome.
I will
so
give you
much,
some
Christina.
things, Danielle, and then they can take their sheets and send it to their boss and say, oh my God, this Christina woman has to come speak because, always be closing.
Yes.
Okay,
Awesome.
bye-bye.
And I want to say to everyone too, just because we're at the sake of for time, I do want to say that if you have questions that if you end up having to jump off right this second and have questions you didn't get answered, you can send them over to us at the contact@womentalkdesign.com and we'll make sure that they get answered. We'll send you. Go ahead, Denise.
Oh, no. I was going to say, I'm happy to stay on for another 15 minutes to kind of make up for our technical difficulty time and transition time and stuff and continue to talk. So for anybody who does not have a hard stop on the hour right now, please, I'm more than happy to stay. I actually pushed off a meeting and stuff like that so I could be here for y'all and we can talk some more because Christina brought up a couple of things that I want to kind of give the counterpoint to and share some more information about. So how many folks can stay for another 10 or 15 minutes? If you would type it in the chat, that would be great. Okay.
Cool.
Yay.
Great.
Anybody
Awesome.
else?
And again, if you can't stay and you want to email us over questions, you can definitely do that. And we will send a bunch of follow-up as well. So we'll send you the recording from this talk, from the one in the evening, and some resources that were talked about. So thanks again for your flexibility, y'all. I know it's hard having technical difficulties, but would love if y'all want to drop in some of the questions that you have in the chat so we can make sure to get those answered. I know Ari said she has 5 minutes, so maybe I'll start with hers, Denise. She had asked previously about how speaking fits in with your profession and your work and day job. How do you connect that and, with your speaking gigs?
Okay, well, so my profession and my working and day job is speaking. So it fits in great. If you're a person who has another profession and you want to just speak to kind of get out there to there's a lot of different reasons you want to share your expertise, you want to build your personal brand, you like speaking, you like teaching, you want to do it on a wider scale, so many things. Okay, yes. And so Carolyn definitely saw that, and I'll answer that. And I will talk about the difference between keynotes and breakouts. So if you're doing it for whatever reason you're doing it, I guess one of the things that I would start doing is to, at the very least, maybe come up with a sheet like Christina has, and I can see, I think I can share my screen because I have her sheet up there. So that's this is what Christina was talking about with oh, can you see it?
No, you're not sharing your screen right
Oh,
now.
I'm not sharing my screen. I thought I was. Share. Now can you see it?
Yay!
Yeah. So she's got what's known as a one sheet. I have one too. I can bring mine up. It looks different than this. But she's got this, and you can see down here she's got her rates in the bottom. She's got her talks and workshops here on the side, kind of marketing copy and uh, testimonial quotes that people who have seen her speak, her book, etc. So and I'm like, I don't know how to get out of sharing your screen. Okay, stop share. Because like I'm so good with Zoom. So when you can have something like that, you can put something like that together, and don't feel like it needs to be super duper yippee skippy. You can even do it in Word or whatever you know how to do. A picture, kind of some talk points and some topics. If do as best you can with the marketing copy, you might be great at writing marketing copy. You didn't even know it, or you know it and you just write it up. And you can have something like that, and you can start kind of sharing that with people, and like actually looking for conferences. So this actually kind of speaks to what Carolyn had asked, like, how do you even do this? Like, I am literally always on the lookout for conferences. If I see that somebody I know is speaking at a conference, if I see something on Twitter and somebody's like, I'm happy to announce that I'm speaking at UX Week, I'm like, UX Week, what's that? And I literally like will follow it, I'll do it. And what I often will do is I'll either take a screenshot or I'll take the URL, and I have a spreadsheet, or I used to at least, where I have conferences that I would like to speak at or conferences to investigate. And I put all of these conferences in this spreadsheet. And if I can find out the name of the organizer, who's on the organizing team, a lot of times they will have an about section and it'll have like the organizers listed. If I can find that out, I will put the organizer. So in this spreadsheet, I typically will have the name of the conference, the URL of the conference, the organizer's name and contact information, name and email. I will have the dates of the conference, and I will have the location of the conference. And so what I did when I first started speaking in 2010 and 2011, I was like a hawk on Twitter, and Twitter was really the main social media. And I would take everything that I saw that people I knew in the industry who were doing similar work or were in kind of the same vein, who spoke at the other conferences that I had, and I would put those conferences in there. And then I actually would put time in my calendar to, if they had what's called a CFP, which stands for call for papers, I would put that into the dates for the CFP into the spreadsheet, and I would sort it by that. And then I would put whatever, time ahead of time of the CFP date. I would like, okay, here's 2 days where I'm going to work on my submission for, Denver CX, user experience conference or whatever it was. And so I made it so that it just became like a regular thing. I was always looking for stuff. I was always on the lookout. I had a very organized way to get it. I would put it in the same place every time. And then I would, like regularly go through and take it and start applying for things like a job. Now, I say that to say that that's how I started doing it. But then once I started speaking at more conferences and I started knowing other speakers who spoke at conferences, then the thing that started working even better than going and doing an application to a CFP, because they get sometimes hundreds, sometimes like, tens, hundreds, sometimes thousands, like a lot of people submitting papers and submitting talk titles. But if you know a speaker who has spoken at an event that you want to speak at, and you have a decent relationship with them, reach out to that person and say, hey, I saw that you spoke at Denver User Experience. Will you please introduce me to the organizer? And that person will say, sure. And so they'll send a little connector email. Then you have just bypassed all of the things of the unwashed masses, right? Like the people who are just sending something in at random. And it's the same thing as kind of jobs, right? When you're applying for a job, if you have somebody, if you know somebody who has a connection inside of that company, you're better off than just sending something through the website. So take that in consideration too. Sometimes there's things that you're like, I've never heard of this. I don't know any of the people, but it looks cool and I want to be at it. So let's just see what I can do. You can also sometimes try to connect with the organizer on LinkedIn, right? So if you get the person's name, you could be like, hey, saw that you're doing this, would love to connect, and then start a relationship and then get in that way. So there's kind of a lot of different ways.
Denise, I know we have a lot of questions. Maybe we can try like a rapid fire. I'll help moderate them. But
hit me.
Sheila asked you mentioned a lot of speakers in tech. Can creatives also be sought out to speak in the corporate world?
Absolutely. It's because creativity, by the way, FYI, LinkedIn did a study that showed that creativity was the top soft skill that companies are looking for in employees. And so creativity is a very hot topic, which is why I'm super excited that it's the thing that I talk about. And so, yeah, there's a lot of call for creative stuff, for more soft skill stuff, persuasion, collaboration, how to work with groups, leadership. All of these topics are actually very, very hot topics to talk to companies about.
Awesome. Great. Next one is about types of speaking engagements. I know you touched on this a little bit, but there's keynotes. What else are there?
Okay.
What about workshops? What is it like to get paid for them?
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you go to a conference, usually there's somebody who opens up the conference, right? And then there are talks throughout the day, and then there's somebody who closes the conference. So with conferences, there are also different kinds of conferences. There are conferences that are known as single track conferences, which means that it's like you just like one stage, a bunch of speakers all on that same stage for the whole day. Then there are conferences that are called multiple track conferences or multi-track conferences, where they have a keynote speaker. Sometimes it's called a plenary session, where everybody in the conference comes to that conference. But then they have different rooms for different topics or subjects or different speakers that all happen at the same time. Those talks are usually called breakout sessions. So then there are workshops, certainly, and then a lot of times also they have panels, right? So as part of a breakout session, or sometimes on a main stage, they'll have a panel, and so you could be asked to be a panelist. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's
okay.
Great.
Great.
I know AC had asked also, do you think it's worth working with an agent? That was a question that was in the Q&A.
I think it is, but what typically, and I've actually talked to agents myself, agents will typically only work with speakers who already have work and who already do work, right? So if you're breaking into the speaking, and I'm not sure where you are in your speaking trajectory, but if you don't have gigs already coming in and stuff like that, then a lot of times, at least my experience at least, has been that agents may not necessarily want to work with you. But if you have other things about you, like you have a New York Times bestseller book, or you've got a nice high position at a well-known company or something like that, then hey, Christina, nice to have you back.
I showed up in the class, and I have these two women TAs, FYI, both women of color, and they were just crushing it. They're like, Christine's not here. We got it down.
Like, oh my God, bye.
All right, good for so working with an agent, I think is a great thing if you're at a place where you're kind of like you're agentable, right? But if you're starting out, I think also it's better to start off and really learn the ropes of the business before you try to hire somebody to do something for you, which you're not even quite sure what you're going to have them do.
Yeah, Christina, any thoughts on agent?
I have had one speakers bureau that worked with me. And the good news is you can name a ridiculously large price. And I know agents and speaker bureaus are slightly different, but
boom.
But I can ask for a ridiculously high price and they'll just mark me up on top of that. But I got sent to a group that wasn't ready for me. I gave the same talk I give everywhere, but in a very masculine industry, in a very male room, and got bad reviews. And I think that I don't like that between. I'd rather have an assistant than an agent or a speakers bureau, because you know, I can make sure I'm going to get paid what I want, and I'm going to make sure that it's going to be an audience that I'm going to be successful for. So I think an agent, I don't really see the point. Same with book agents, though. I self-publish because I like money, strangely enough.
Yeah, on the topics of books, I know Ari had to hop off, but this might be relevant for everyone about does having a book help get you more speaker gigs? Does it help with your confidence with being a keynote and just overall legitimize you? Should people be writing books?
Mind if I start off and then you can chime in?
Get in there.
Okay. So when I wrote my first book, Information Architecture for the Web, it did get me some work, not much, but a little bit. And it did mean I had a lot of material to make slides, but it was kind of pointless. And as I dug in, I felt like every time I talked to a conference organizer, they would say, oh, we'll help sell books. And when I talk to publishers, they say, oh, we'll help you get speaking gigs. And I'm like, where's the money in this equation? So I decided to get paid for both. So I went over to self-publishing. Radical Focus luckily turned out to be a bestseller. And then I started charging for talks. And to be honest, I feel like everybody would love to get something for free. And I'm done giving the milk away for free. Just done. Yep. How about you, Denise? What's your story?
Okay, so my first book was called The CSS Detective Guide. And part of the reason I wrote that book was so that I could start speaking. And I had a friend who basically was like, look, I was like, I just want to be a speaker. I don't know how I can be a speaker. She was like, I don't know what to tell you other than everybody I know who's a speaker has a book. And I was just like, okay. And then 2 days later at a party at South by Southwest, I ran into a woman who was an acquisitions editor for Peach Pit New Writers. And we talked about this idea for a book on troubleshooting CSS, and then kind of the rest is history. What ended up happening through the process of writing the book was that by the time I was done with it, even though I hadn't changed as a speaker myself, because I had already had the instruction background from teaching at Seattle Central for almost 5 years, I felt more confident going to conferences and saying, hey, I can talk about this because I'm an expert, because I have a book about it, right? So I don't think necessarily ipso facto a book makes you more valuable to people. I think it does to some degree, but I think that it can help you sit in your expertise. It can help you focus your expertise so that you feel like you actually, when you go, you're like, look, I wrote a book on this, and the people like, and the people actually, because your attitude is different about yourself, then people will treat you differently. So it's kind of one of those little mind games. I love what you said, Christina, about if you write a book, make it on a topic you'd enjoy talking about for 10 years, or, you know, 2, if it's in text and things change. I saw a question up here, sorry, Danielle, to thing, but
yeah, is this the one about is
videos
having videos giving your work away? That was a question from Faye.
Okay, so Faye, one of the reasons that, so first of all, a lot of times conferences they make videos, they do the videos themselves. They do the videos and then they put it up on the web. That is actually really helpful for you, because without people being able to see what you do, they're not going to know. And the weird thing about speaking is that speaking is kind of one of those things where if you're not there, it's like this kind of ethereal experience, right? Like it's this thing that happens in this moment in time, and then it's gone. And even if you get a video of it, nobody can feel what the room felt like. Nobody can feel the vibe. Sometimes it comes through, sometimes it doesn't. And so the video is like the next best thing you have for that. And as a speaker, because at some point in time, if you're going to be serious about this, you want to do it, you might want to have a speaker reel and stuff like that. The video is gold, and the free video that you get from other conferences, if it's well produced and it's in good quality, is invaluable. And so that's another thing actually that I would say to write into your speaker agreement, is that you're going to be getting the video from them, that you have access, or that they even can give you the raw video so that you can use it for your own purposes. So it's not really giving away your stuff for free, because most likely that talk might have been tailored for that audience, and you may never ever give it again in that particular format, right? And even if you do the exact same content, you might be riffing with the audience, you might be making jokes, there might be doing stuff that's literally never going to happen again. So the video is not like you giving away your information, because what people want is the experience of you. The content is important, but it's the content paired with the experience of you that
just because you have the album, you want to go see Bruce Springsteen live. It's just a thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Denise, also, I think what I love is looking around for local groups like Creative Mornings that put on really high quality talks to get your video, even if it doesn't cost anything. At least it's not costing you a bunch of travel too. So I know Danielle's a big fan of Creative Mornings.
Creative Mornings is great. You can only speak at a Creative Mornings once. Once you speak, my experience is that once you speak at Creative Mornings, that's it. You can't speak at any Creative Mornings anywhere in the world ever again.
I think they made an exception once. But.
Did they? Yeah.
Awesome. This has been so wonderful. Thank you all both so much for sticking around, and all of you attendees as well. I hope you were able to get your questions answered. And again, you can feel free to email us if you didn't, and we can bring it up in the next one. We'll send you, all the details for that. Thank you so much, Christina and Denise. You both were so wonderful. Really appreciate you being here. And again, attendees, thank you for being here and being flexible with our technical difficulties. Please let others know we're hosting this again tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. So if you know someone who would benefit from this conversation, we'd love for you to share the link with them.
And even if you want to come back again and see if we say anything different, we're happy to have you come back.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I gotta say, the price is right. It's ridiculous. You might as well.
Finally, I dropped a feedback survey in there because we always want your feedback.
And I know Danielle's shy for asking, but really, please send it out. Right now, Women Talk Design, like many other speaking organizations, is really struggling to make this transition to online. And anything you can do to get people to come will help make sure Women Talk Design is there for you when you need us again. So please support the organization. Put it on LinkedIn, put it on Twitter, put it on the Facebooks, but please let people know. Thank you.
The Facebooks.
The Facebooks. I've heard good things about them.
They're very good.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks everyone so much.
Thanks everybody. Okay.
Have a good rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.